Here's a fact that should disturb you. 70% of wealthy families lose their money by the second generation, 90% by the third. So if your father built something, statistically, your grandchildren will have nothing. But then there are families like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Agnellis, dynasties that have been rich not for decades, but for centuries. What do they know that everyone else doesn't? Because it's not luck. It's not the economy. And I promise you, it's not intelligence. It's a system. And today I'm going to show you exactly what that system looks like. Stay with me for the next 10 minutes, because what I'm about to share completely changed how I think about building and keeping wealth. Most people focus on making money. Old money families focus on keeping it. That single difference in mindset is the entire game. Let's get into it. There's an old saying in almost every culture on earth. In America, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. In China, rice paddy to rice paddy in 3 generations. In Italy, from the stable to the stars and back to the stable. Every culture on earth independently arrived at the same conclusion. Wealth, left unmanaged, disappears in exactly 3 generations. Generation 1 builds it. Generation 2 spends it. Generation 3 inherits debt. And here's the painful truth. Most newly wealthy families follow this script perfectly. The first generation is hungry, they sacrifice, they build. The second generation grew up watching their parents work, so they're comfortable, but not quite as driven. The third generation, they grew up with everything. They've never known scarcity. And without the right foundation, they treat wealth like a buffet instead of a responsibility. Now, old money families cracked this code centuries ago, and their solution has nothing to do with how much money you make. It has everything to do with what you build around the money. Old money families operate on 3 pillars that new money almost always skips. Pillar 1, the structure. Old money doesn't just hold wealth, it houses it. In trusts, in family offices, in holding entities that legally separate the family from the assets. Here's why this matters. When wealth sits in an individual's name, it's exposed to lawsuits, to divorce, to poor decisions, to estate disputes. But when wealth lives inside a properly structured trust or holding entity, it becomes almost untouchable. The Rockefellers mastered this. John D. Rockefeller Sr. set up trusts for his heirs that have been compounding and protecting assets since the late 1800s. Not because he was lucky, because he understood that the structure is the fortress. The money goes inside. The family benefits from the inside, but the assets themselves are protected by the walls. Most new money skips this step entirely. They make $1 million and buy a house in their name, a car in their name, a business in their name. Everything they own becomes a target the moment anything goes wrong. Old money builds the walls first, then they put the money inside. Pillar 2, the philosophy. This one is invisible, which is exactly why most people miss it. Old money families have a fundamentally different relationship with wealth. New money sees wealth as something to display. Old money sees wealth as something to steward. There's a principle used in Gulf dynasty families, some of the oldest continuous wealth systems in the world, called the sacred duty of generosity. It sounds counterintuitive, but the wealthiest dynastic families view spending on their communities, their networks, and their causes not as charity, but as investment. Social capital that returns compound interest across generations. They also follow what I call the trade before investment principle. Before speculation, before markets, before anything passive. Build something that produces, a business, a trade, a skill that generates real economic value. Passive income is the result of building something real, not the starting point. New money skips straight to passive. Old money builds the engine first. Pillar 3, the education. This is where most families fail completely silently. Old money families don't just transfer assets to the next generation. They transfer financial literacy. From the time their children are young, they are taught how money works, how structures work, what assets are versus what liabilities are, how to negotiate, how to read a deal. The Rockefeller family famously required their children to keep ledgers of every dollar they earned and spent from childhood. Not because they needed the money tracked, but because they needed the discipline to be built into muscle memory. Compare that to the average newly wealthy family, where the kids grow up in luxury, are handed money freely, and are never taught what generated it or how to protect it. You can give a child $1 million, or you can give them the knowledge to build and keep millions. Old money gives both. New money usually gives only one. Here's where it gets interesting. Each of these pillars individually is powerful, but old money doesn't pick one. They run all 3 simultaneously, across every generation. And here's what happens when you do that over time. The structure protects the assets from external threats. The philosophy protects the assets from internal threats, bad decisions, lifestyle inflation, entitlement. The education ensures the next generation is equipped to continue all of it. Each generation doesn't just inherit money. They inherit a system that trains them to be worthy of it. Think about what that looks like across 200 years. Generation 1 builds wealth and sets up the structure. Generation 2 inherits the structure and the philosophy, so instead of spending it down, they continue building. Generation 3 inherits the full system, the structure, the philosophy, the education, and they add to it. By Generation 4, you're not a family that's rich. You're a dynasty. Now contrast that with new money. Generation 1 builds wealth. No structure, no system, no financial education passed down. Generation 2 inherits the money, but not the wisdom. Generation 3 inherits whatever's left. Same starting point, completely different outcome, 100 years later. The difference isn't luck, it's architecture. Now, you don't need to be a Rockefeller to start implementing this. The 3 pillars aren't reserved for people who already have hundreds of millions. They're principles you can start applying at any level of wealth. And the earlier you start, the more powerful the compounding. Start with the structure. Even at modest levels of wealth, holding entities and basic trust structures can protect what you're building. Talk to an asset protection attorney. Get your structure right before you need it, because by the time you need it, it's too late. Here's the honest reality most people face. They wait until they've made enough money to justify the structure. But that's exactly backwards. The Rockefellers didn't build the fortress after they accumulated the wealth. They built it at the same time. The structure and the wealth grew together. A basic LLC costs a few $100s to set up. A simple trust can be established for a few thousand. These aren't tools for the ultra-wealthy. They're tools for anyone who is serious about what they're building lasting longer than one generation. Install the philosophy. Decide right now that your job is not just to make money, it's to steward it. That means thinking before you spend, asking whether an expense is an asset or a liability, building real things before chasing passive income. Most people approach wealth like a sprint. Old money treats it like an infrastructure project. You don't sprint to build a highway. You lay each section methodically, knowing every mile you put down now compounds into the network decades later. The steward mindset isn't just about what you don't spend. It's about what every dollar you deploy is working toward. Every expense is either a foundation stone or it's waste. Begin the education with yourself and with your family. Read, learn, understand how wealth actually works at the highest levels. And if you have children, start the conversation early. Teach them the ledger. Teach them the difference between price and value. Give them the wisdom alongside the money. The families that stay rich for 200 years aren't smarter than you. They just started these habits earlier and never stopped. Here's the summary. New money focuses on making. Old money focuses on keeping, structuring, and transferring. The shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves curse isn't inevitable. It's just what happens when wealth travels without a system attached to it. You now know the 3 pillars: structure, philosophy, education. Start building all 3, not someday, now. Because the families that are still rich 200 years from now, they started exactly where you're standing. And they built the right foundation. The game hasn't changed in 200 years. The families that are still wealthy today started with the same decisions you're looking at right now. They just made them consistently, generation after generation. They built structures that protected what they built. They adopted philosophies that governed how they lived. And they educated the next generation before there was anything to inherit. You can start all 3 today. No matter where you are financially, one entity, one mindset shift, one honest conversation with your kids. If you found this video valuable, subscribe because I drop content like this every week. I'll see you in the next one.